YouTube, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's good to be back as always. Hello to everybody on the Twitch channel as well, for those of you who are watching. Welcome back, guys. As of yesterday, I believe, Chiron's patch was released along with the ranked reset, and I actually haven't read any of the patch notes, guys, so I kind of just wanted to get into it with you guys and just give you my opinion of the patch notes as a top 100 ranked player, and just see what kind of fun stuff High Risk decided to release this time around. So let's get right into it. Okay, so Baga's buff. They buffed his chug, increased damage scaling on protections, increased damage per tick on his burp. Yeah, I do think Bacchus was kind of, specifically non-aspect Bacchus, is feeling particularly weak as of late. I don't think his passive is quite as potent as it was in SMITE 1, considering his aspect is so much stronger as well. Definitely his 1 was a little bit lackluster. I'm glad they buffed it, so now the more protections he's built, which you should be when you're playing non-aspect Bacchus, you know, the stronger his self buff is going to feel. So I think this was a very much needed buff for Bacchus. He was on the lower end of supports, if you ask me. Very all-in-y, hard CC kind of god, and not much to, you know, play around when his engage is getting neutralized. Belch increased damage as well for lane pressure. This is really good because you've been seeing the meta dominated by ranged supports lately, guys. Baron, Yemo, RTO, and Sylvanas. And so melee gods such as Bacchus and Emir, they're like just losing pressure by virtue of not being ranged, even though they are high pressure gods. So really good buff for Bacchus all around. I think this is going to help him get back into contention. Bari buff. We definitely have not been seeing a lot of Bari in ranked lately, guys. I'm not a big Bari player myself, so I wouldn't know what specifically about her was so lackluster, but definitely something about her was pretty weak. So they buffed her Reverent Steps, now grants attack speed, which I believe is pretty good for strength Bari. Not sure how this impacts intelligence Bari too much, but you know, an attack speed increase. Discordia nerf. We were seeing a lot of Discordia in ranked. I don't know specifically what her win rate was. I think games with her would go either way. Like sometimes she'd do no damage, sometimes she'd be a walking nuke. It's kind of, you know, the volatility of intelligence mages right now is sometimes their scaling just feels like it can never get online, and when they do get ahead, they're just kind of OP. So they fixed her passive. More clarity on that now. Yeah, it was kind of hard to tell like what passive was prog. Let's see, her 3 has been nerfed. It was definitely a pretty potent ability for what it does. A lot of cooldown reduction. So they had to fine-tune that, because Discordia was always a god that sacrificed a little bit of damage for more utility, like movement, stealth, cooldown reduction. And in this case, it was kind of overtuned. So they have, you know, taken a look at that and reduced it a little bit. Kali buff. Yeah, Kali was pretty weak lately. Definitely in need of some buffs. She just got hyper nerfed from back when she was Thanos. So they've increased her 1, her 2, all damage scaling on this, specifically strength, but also looks like a little bit of intelligence. And I do think she really needed this buff. She was kind of like borderline unplayable. The only time you'd see her is like a full intelligence build out of a side lane, and you know, it's kind of like a very niche playstyle. If you're good with the character, it can be good, but it's not like a pick that everybody can go to. Very niche, so I'm glad they buffed her a little bit. Now, will that make side lane intelligence Kali really strong? I don't know. We'll see. I do think she was, you know, on the side of needing a buff though. Aspect nerf for Cuckoo. Been hearing a lot of complaints about this. I think the main thing is he can build tank and still dish out more damage than he's supposed to. So, been hearing a lot of complaints about mage solos or like aspect solos instead of just like traditional warriors. And I do think we're like kind of reaching that point right now in the game where everything is either an aspect or an off-roll mage in the solo lane. You don't really see a lot of traditional warriors in the lane itself. Things like Cuckoo aspect taking over. It was kind of overtuned for the fact that you could build really tanky and still do a lot of damage with like really low cooldown. So yeah, it definitely needed a bit of a nerf. They were decreasing the slow on his 1. No longer buffs himself with protections on the 2. And he no longer prod shreds as strong. Medusa, they nerfed Viper Shot. I guess she was kind of like on the stronger side compared to other hunters slash mid lane hunters. I think she was fine though. She's a very like all-in character. Needs to dash to like get her all-in off. Just been seeing her a lot lately, and that's probably like boosted her win rate or something. But I don't think she was like giga oppressive. But you know, Viper Shot, nerf one, I guess it's warranted. Merlin buff again. This is insane, Hi-Rez. What are we doing? Merlin might be like one of the only the most viable mages in the game, and mages are already in a really weak spot. Just because of how they are like a victim to their scaling circumstance. If they're scaling with the clock, they're fine. They can even get ahead and be pretty strong. But any mage that is like slightly behind is just like really weak compared to everybody else. And Merlin was one of the mages that can kind of bypass that just because he has so many buttons, such strong clear and such high base damage, that Merlin was always just in a great spot, you know, for himself, whether you're playing base aspect or sorry, base or aspect. And I'm actually very surprised to hear they're buffing him. His viability has always been there. I don't know what compelled them to give him these buffs. I don't think his percentages were ever that low, both in terms of damage and win rate. They're buffing literally everything. His 1B, his 2A, his 2B. I don't know. Merlin was already a great character, if you ask me. I don't know why they're buffing him. Not aspect nerf. This aspect was definitely ridiculous. Decreased inner damage. You were seeing a ton of literally tank nut in mid, in ADC, in jungle even. Genuinely tank nut with a couple of lifesteal items. Just, you know, going bizarre, top damage, going berserk. This aspect was definitely overtuned. They're reducing the damage, it seems, on her one aspect of the Cosmos. They're removing base bonus damage, decreasing mitigations, which is probably gonna hurt her in support, but this is probably necessary to make sure that like her bruiser build isn't as strong. And yeah, a lot of general nerfs to her. I hope she's still viable in support and solo, because I do like seeing a lot of role variety in the game. I think it is good for the game, but we'll see where it leads her. In general, I do think these nerfs were needed. Wukong buff. This is for base Wukong. They're just increasing the damage pretty much, I suppose. I think just like Merlin, Wukong was already always rather viable, but the difference is traditional warriors, like I said, were getting overshadowed by off-roll aspects and off-roll mages. So I think they're kind of wanting to bring traditional warriors back into the picture, and a damage buff for Wukong will definitely do that. He's always been a strong poke character. This is just playing into his strengths, making his poke even stronger, giving him a little bit more lane pressure. But now that I look at it, not really. They're keeping his lane pressure more or less the same, because as you can see, the level 1 and level 2 ranks are virtually the same. It's more so this late game poke that they're looking at, just to give him some more viability in the late game compared to, I don't know, someone like Thanos, like Cuckoo aspect late game, who's complete tank and can still one-shot something. So I'd say it's a good buff for Wukong. Ullr nerf. Ullr was definitely up there like with the top characters in the game. My view on Smite gods is the strongest kind of abilities, guys, are ranged CCs, especially if they do damage. So think of Ullr Axe, think of Anubis Wrap, think of Thor Wall. Range CC that comes at little risk to yourself and also pokes them is incredibly strong in the game. And well, Ullr not only had an incredibly powerful ability to do that, right, his axe, the rest of his kit also is incredibly useful. High damage, high mobility, self buff. And yeah, Ullr was just ridiculous. Bladed Arrow no longer goes through walls, so it's kind of nerfing his ability to poke, you know, through walls and be a menace wherever he is on the map. I would have liked to see a different kind of nerf, but it is a good start. He is a ridiculous character. Emir buff, same thing that I said with Bacchus earlier. Just getting out pressured by range supports everywhere when he's supposed to be a high pressure pick himself. So they're increasing the damage on his freeze, which I don't know how much that'll help, but I suppose it's a start. And then they're also buffing his ultimate. So a lot more damage and decreased cooldown to keep himself alive with CC immunity and set up for his team. Pretty good buff. I'm not sure what the thought process is for buffing his freeze. If anything, they should buff his 2 so that he can compete with range supports when it comes to clearing lane and pressuring lane opponents. But I think this is a good start. And then a Zeus bug fix. Detonate was unable to stun targets that were damage immune. Oh, I did not know that. Quality of life fix. And then they're also increasing the attack speed on his self buff. as well as the damage on his ultimate. Yeah, I think Zeus was kind of suffering from the same problems that all the other mages had, and his ultimate, whenever people walk out of it, like you weren't able to set it up with a stun, it did feel like really lackluster, like worse than a base ability. So it did need a little bit of attention. And then this is good for boxing, and you might be playing him ADC or solo, or just, you know, for whenever you're boxing in mid. Not a bad buff. I think it'll definitely help him a little bit in lane. So now some item balances. Arendite, I always thought Arendite was a great item. You just didn't really see it because there's so many other great cooldown options. Hydra, Jotuns, Crusher. So they're buffing not only the passive but the strength, and this item is going to be actually really strong for the price that it's worth. I think I'm not sure if it necessarily needed this buff. I just think there needed to be some utility changes to make it compete more with the other cooldown items. The route they're taking is adding more strength to it. I mean, it'll be good for the price, but we'll see if anybody actually ends up picking it up. Bloodbound Book buff. You're virtually never seeing this item. I guess giving it some intelligence might, you know, give it some more viability. Thing is, like, intelligence scales so poorly in this game, or at least mages have such poor scaling, that sometimes giving items basic intelligence buffs like this won't really make a difference, but we'll see. Dwarven Plate Shift. This item, I have never seen this item purchased for the mere fact that it is an active item and takes up one of your active slots, and that's not really something you want. So looks like they're shifting some of the stats, giving it more protections. Decrease lower protection. Yeah, I don't think this item will make, I don't think it'll be any more viable. It is a really hard protection spike, but protections suffer from a lot of mitigating returns in this game, meaning the more you have, the less useful they are. Like, the difference between 200 and 300 protections at that point is not very noticeable. Kind of noticeable, but like, you get what I'm saying. The more you buy, the less noticeable it is. And I don't think, like, people would rather just buy utility. They'd rather buy Mushroom, they'd rather buy Nemean Lion, things you can actually use to impact the fight, rather than just raw stats that have diminishing returns as you buy more of them. That's why you don't really see a lot of Dwarven play. You don't really see a lot of Prophetic Cloak. Eye of Erebus. I've never used this item. Now reveals target hit for duration, increased radius, increased health. Some pretty good, you know, buffs for the stats and the passive. Might see a little bit. I don't know. Again, there's just more useful items out there like Sanguine Lash, stuff like that. I don't know. Grim Warrior buff, increased intelligence. Again, I don't know if this will help. Like, when it comes to intelligence, really small buffs like this are generally negligent. You don't really feel them. I don't think this item will get any more viability. Heartseeker nerf, decreased strength scaling by 0.5%. Yeah, strength items are a little bit overtuned. I'm not sure how much this will actually impact it. I think it'll still be a ridiculous item, like a super core item for junglers and physical mid laners. I think they're just trying to bring down the scaling a tiny bit, because strength is so overtuned. But I'm not sure this quite hits the mark. Hydra's nerf, decreased bonus damage for ranged characters from 30 to 20. Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Ranged characters could definitely abuse this. Like, you even saw Snatty doing like Strength Merlin and just lasering people with ranged Hydra's autos. It is kind of obnoxious when it comes coming from a ranged character, and I think this also ties into that Uller nerf we were talking about earlier. Jade Scepter buff, more intelligence. This is a pretty good amount of intelligence. More health. And now they've buffed it so that you can kind of manipulate the knockback a little bit. You can knock people back towards you and knock yourself back, I suppose. Nice. I think that's a pretty cool item. We're definitely going to be seeing this out of mid laners, I think. This is like a lot of good, you know, this can do you really good when you're setting up your own abilities or trying to outplay a gank that was just done onto you. You might even see this from supports from time to time. So I like this item. I love creative items like this. Jotun's Revenge buff, increased mana. Now they're giving it mana, I suppose. Probably so you can like afford to go with first item instead of Hydra's, but I don't know. Mana at some point becomes pretty useless in the game. Kind of a cool buff. This was definitely needed. This pendulum price reduction. This item was ridiculously expensive. The item itself is always really strong, but for this price, you have to farm for so long, and it only gives you about 40 strength and 10 cooldown. Yes, the passive can change any interaction, but that price was almost always not worth it. Like, you would rather generally just go Hydras and Crusher, and it's a much stronger spike, and just one-shot somebody off of that. Particularly, you know, specifically speaking in the jungle. So, much needed buff here. I'm afraid actually, like, it'll be this item might become like too relevant now. Another Sanguine Lash nerf. I think this item was like okay at this point. Now they're just removing the lifesteal on use so that you can't sustain as much. Okay, I guess. Sphere of Negation nerf. This item was oppressive. So much intelligence, so much protections. So they're reducing the magical protection. It's still very strong when it comes to magical protections. 50 is up there with the highest items. Decrease the shield gain. Okay, they only reduced it by 0.5%. And then the maximum shield. Now this item is still ridiculous. This item is still really strong. These nerfs are like negligible, I think. Because it's still scaling off a large percentage of your max health. So right, you're buying this item and then a health item. Say for example this and the Mayan Lion. And you still have a ton of max health, you have a ton of magical protection. This item is still really strong. I think if they want to nerf this item, they're gonna have to do something else to it. Especially because, I mean, I get that they're also increasing the intelligence of some other items. So we're reducing the amount of magical defense that's available and increasing the amount of intelligence that's available. So now we're gonna be, if I'm playing a tank, I'm gonna be taking more magical damage. But I think this item is still incredibly strong. A lot of protection, a lot of utility. The Crusher nerf, decreasing the strength from 60 to 50 and subsequent hits from 50 to 33. This is a pretty sizable nerf. Crusher was another just hardcore item that you saw out of all junglers and physical mids. Like, you just can't afford not to go it. The damage output, the strength is insane. This is a pretty big nerf. I'm not sure if it's too big. I'll have to try it out myself. But again, strength items were overtuned and something definitely needed to be done about it. So it is a step in the right direction. We'll just see how hard this hits. And then the Reaper nerf, decreased lifesteal from 10 to 75 or 7.5 to bring it in line with other items. I suppose. I always thought it having 10 was like good for it. It's kind of like all the different lifesteal items provide a different kind of utility. This one, what it provides is even more sustained compared to the others. So it having 10% always made sense to me. I don't know if they needed to do this, but I guess they're just trying to make everything have the same amount of lifesteal so that everything's balanced. And then Time Lock Aegis. Yeah, this item was ridiculous. This item was game winning and you'd see multiple people have it in one lobby and it was just mayhem. I mean, you're still gonna see that, but it was definitely in need of a nerf. So they're reducing the reduction, reducing the regen, right? Because especially when you had Fire Giant, this regen was insane. And decrease the cooldown reduction. Alright, so definitely a step in the right direction. This cooldown reduction is still ridiculously strong. Like, you're literally getting all of your abilities back. Regen, it's not as oppressive anymore. It'll still be prevalent. I think this is a correct nerf right here. If it needs to be reduced again, then so be it. They'll do it again. But this is definitely the right step. And then this duration decrease, I think, is also correct. It's just a much less disruptive item now. Like, it's still gonna feel like an upgraded Aegis and do its thing, but not with like literally game-winning stats anymore. So I think this is a W nerf. You're still gonna see it a lot. Typhon's Heart Shift, increased intelligence. That is a pretty sizable intelligence buff. From 50 to 80. That's 30 plus. And then, but then they decreased the lifesteal. Again, bringing lifesteal back in line so that all items have the same amount of lifesteal. The intelligence is good. The lifesteal, not so strong anymore. But this item does have a strong passive, right? It gives you a pet that hits pretty hard. So if you're hitting harder and at least sustaining somewhat with this lifesteal nerf, and you have a summonable pet on top of that, I think it might be a viable item. We'll just see. And then consumables. Health and mana regen effects from consumable potions are now removed. Yeah, because people were fountain abusing this, meaning you'd exit fountain, deplete your chalice 3 times, walk right back into the chalice, and then go to lane, and you have like, you know, your chalice is ticking, and then you have 3 more chalice uses on top of that. So they're just patching that a little bit. And that seems to be it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to know what your opinions are. I haven't played the patch myself personally, guys, so I'd love to know what your opinions are, what you think is strong, what you think needs to be tweaked, what you think they did good, they did bad. And I'll definitely get into the patch now, play some games, and I'll let you guys know what I think later on. But Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm out.